Hey everybody, Jonathan Wells back here with another episode of Local Legends. Today we've got Shonda Frazier, real estate agent with Coldwell Banker. Shonda, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been licensed in Indiana for going on 5 years, licensed in Illinois for about 6 years, so dual license agent. Um, what I specialize in, of course, is first time home buyers and then a lot of short sales and probates pretty much is my specialty.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice, absolutely. So we had met before. I remember we met on a deal with one of your old business partners. My buyer was actually purchasing that home.
Oh,
In Gary. And
mhm.
so I know we had first met there, but then we got reintroduced when, you had another deal with Justin.
Mhm. Love
So
Justin.
yeah, absolutely. So
Love
it's
Justin.
great, like, knowing you've been in the business for, the amount of time that you have been, it's been, great seeing you from, over the years and stuff. And I know that you really focus. I mean, you do deals all over, but you're one of the more outspoken agents when it comes to specific markets in Northwest Indiana.
Correct. Yep.
So why don't we talk about like what really draws you to those markets and what you think there's a lot of opportunity in.
Um, Pretty much like for instance, I'm from Chicago. So a
Hmm.
lot of people always say, like, oh, you're like always talking about Indiana markets. And it's I think Indiana markets are unique
Hmm.
and they have a lot more opportunity than a lot of markets in Illinois, more specifically, the Chicagoland area. And so really specifically drawn to the Gary housing market. Like
Hmm.
first of like me naturally, I'm always rooting for the underdog, pretty
Yeah,
much. So
for sure.
everyone, well, I wouldn't say everyone, but a lot of places, if you say Gary, it has the stigma to
Hmm.
Gary. Like it's Gary is this and it's not this and it's run down and it's abandoned. And so coming over into Indiana, being licensed in Indiana, of course, I got to see Gary firsthand. Like a lot of people from over on the other side of state line, like they hear about it, but they never been to Gary.
Right.
And Gary actually has like a lot of nice areas. Like it's not all bad as what they perceive. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm drawn to Gary. And then another reason why I'm drawn to Gary more specifically in a real estate aspect is that um property taxes.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
mean, I can't sugarcoat that, like property taxes. So I have with the shift in the market and people discussing affordability now,
Hmm.
I have a lot of people that come to me that are currently living in Illinois and exploring Indiana now, basically, because if they're purchasing and they have a $300,000 pre-approval with the property taxes in Illinois, that still kind of limits you. Like you look at your paper and you say, "Oh, I'm pre-approved for 300," like the sky's is the limit, and that's really not the case in
Right.
Illinois.
Yeah.
Versus if you bring that same pre-approval over, like your 300,000 pre-approval in Illinois might actually be something like 400,000 in
Hmm.
Indiana, depending on the
Yeah,
property taxes.
absolutely.
And so with Gary, like I've sold, I want to say over like as a traditional like buyers, buying it, I've sold over 20 homes in Gary. And so I've sold homes where taxes were like $200 a year.
Right.
Or something like, and so with that being said, people are, looking for the nice homes. And of course, as a first time home buyer, a lot of people look for, the newly rehabbed homes and they want like the gray floors and the nice chandeliers and, all
Right.
that stuff. But they also want to stay on a budget. And so I'm pro Gary because you can get all of that
Hmm.
plus and a more affordable mortgage than if you were to be buying in Chicago or in the suburbs or,
Yeah.
where they have $13,000 taxes. So knowing, like I said, knowing what I know about Gary, that is not like all bad. It's a new mayor that,
Yeah.
seems to be doing a lot of great things. There are a lot of good things coming to Gary. I push for Gary. Like I
Yeah.
want to see them win. I want to see in a couple years that it's a thriving, community and not a lot of, great buyers with, new homes. So I'm just pro Gary. And I
Yeah.
always, soon as someone says like, hey, are you interested in Gary? Have you heard about Gary? Do you want to take a ride through Gary so that we can kind of, fix that stigma in your mind? And yeah, let's do
Yeah,
it.
definitely. So like going on to that, right? I have a lot of clients that, they'll come to me and they'll get pre-approved, and they're the first time home buyers. Maybe they came back after a few years or whatever it is, right? They're getting their pre-approval and they're like, okay, I want to buy a 3-bed, 2-bath, and I want to be in, like, let's say Crown Point, Hobart, or Cedar Lake or something like that,
Hmm.
right? And so they're kind of shocked because now those homes are worth 260, 275, 280 sometimes, depending on the area and whatnot. And so they're like, okay, well, I want, based on their payment goals, they want to be, right around 200 to 225.
Hmm.
And so then at that point, I'm bringing up, okay, well, we might need to expand the markets that you're looking at. Let's look into places like Maryville. Let's look into places like, Gary. Let's look into
Hmm.
other, spots that are still in the region. There's still nice pockets in there.
Right.
And so sometimes we'll get pushback. Sometimes they're open to it, depending on, the personality of who's, making that decision. Um, but yeah, like, I think that there's a lot of, like, to your point, there's a lot of value in those markets that are still developing. And like, where do you see, Gary and Maryville in the next, 5 to 10 years?
So for Maryville, I sold quite a few homes, maybe about 7 in Maryville, maybe.
Hmm.
I like Maryville. I think that it's already a thriving community, but I think that like what it has to give as far as like the local like businesses and things like that, like it's driving in more buyers. And my personal opinion is that Maryville is like the next go-to when someone doesn't want to go to Gary. Like I
Yeah.
don't want to go to Gary, oh, but I'll go to Maryville type of
Right.
thing. So they're kind of like bringing in all of those residents. So I think Maryville is pretty much thriving right now on its own. Like it's great.
Yeah.
Of course, in 5 years with all of the Indiana traffic in the market, that it will just be one of those, Maryville will actually sit in a conversation with Crown Point. Crown
Yeah.
Point is like here and then,
Right.
yeah, but as far as Gary, like I said, they have the Lake County Convention Center coming.
Hmm.
They already have Hard Rock Casino. They have Miller Beach already. That's
Aren't they
thriving.
bringing in, like, I thought I saw somewhere that FedEx is coming in to Gary,
I think that was
or is
a
it like
talk.
fake?
I think it's a talk, but I
Okay.
think it's not concrete. Don't
Got
quote
it.
me on that. But
Okay.
but
I
like,
don't know, but
I've heard the mayor talk about, bringing, bigger businesses into Gary. So, 5 years from now, like I said, I think Gary, how I said Maryville can sit in the same conversation with Crown Point. I think Gary will start to be able to sit in the same conversation as like Hammond
sure.
or Griffith, those
Yeah.
neighboring cities. So I really think that those two, like we just talked about, are probably one of the two areas that are up and coming, and then that if people want to purchase in it, they probably should purchase now, because
Yeah.
5 years from now it'll be, well, we're the same as Crown Point or we're the same as Hammond. You got to have some money to come.
Right. Well, and I think that, like, to be completely honest, like, from my perspective of the industry, like, you know, our market, just Northwest Indiana as a whole, we have a lot of people moving in here.
Hmm.
Not just from Illinois, but you also have locals that are now becoming of age and they're starting to buy their own homes and everything else.
Hmm.
And it obviously doesn't hurt that you have higher taxes in Illinois, so people are moving over, to help with more affordable lifestyles and things of that nature. So personally, I think that, like, the rising tide raises all ships, right? So, I think that you're going to, just from the sheer amount of people that are moving in, markets are going to increase regardless, right?
Right.
And, going back to Gary, like, that is a market where it's got the most affordable homes in the area. Like, you're
Yes.
not going to find, if you put two homes that are identical next to each other, the one in Gary is going to be discounted considerably versus one that's going to be
Exactly.
priced anywhere else, right?
Exactly.
And so it's funny, like, even with real estate investing, right? Like, if you're purchasing for retail purposes or you're purchasing for investment purchases or purposes, um, you know, I've seen people talk about, that they buy rentals in Gary and stuff, and they're like, yeah, like I used to be buying these houses for 60 grand, and now I'm paying 150 or almost
Yes.
200. And then over the next 5 years, even as the market continues to rise, like it's going to be more difficult to get into real estate investing too
Yes.
because of the price points.
Yes, that's it's a double-edged sword both on retail and investing side. And just like you said, when I got licensed in Indiana a couple years ago, investors were purchasing homes in Gary for, 15,000,
Hmm.
$20,000. And then now, I have investors that I'm working with that, like I'm saying like $65,000 is a deal, you know, like, what, and I think that kind of like rolls over, like, because that's on the back end. Of course,
Yeah.
these investors have to buy at a higher price, which now in turns you have to retail it and sell it at a higher price. And I think that
Right.
that's something that traditional buyers don't quite like understand that. Like,
Sure.
what I'm saying, nowadays when I'm selling homes in Gary for 250,
Hmm.
um and of course, like you said, I'm very active on social media. And so when I post these homes for like 250, 260 in Gary, then of course you'll get these comments like, who's spending 250 in
Right.
Gary? And it's like, no, Gary, like it's like I won't even say Gary person. I'll just say real estate in itself isn't what it was, 5
Yeah.
years ago. And then on top of, inflation and all of these things costing a lot more. And I think buyers just don't understand, like, when the market shifts and when investors were purchasing homes for 15,000 and rehabbing and able to put them back on the market for 150, 160, like
Right.
that's no longer a thing. Like, in the Indiana market, I want to say outside of Gary, like an average 3-bedroom, 2-bath home that's commonly what people are looking for, like you'll need like 250, 260 minimum,
Yeah.
if you
Hmm.
want something that's completely brand new. And I think that a lot of buyers just don't understand that part.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think there's a lot of like, they just expect that things are the same price that it was, even 3 years ago,
Yeah.
right? And unfortunately, that's just not the case.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep.
what are some other things that you, like, as a real estate agent, right? Like you're working with different clients. I know we talked about loan programs and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
before we started this call. What are some of your favorite, programs that you've worked with clients to help them actually get approved and get into these different homes?
I love right now, like with the market, the way that it is, and that the housing shortage and with the, prices up, I am totally in love with 203K loans.
Hmm.
Because when it all boils down to real estate is really about location. Like,
Hmm.
say for instance, Crown Point, like there is only so many amount of homes in Crown Point. There's only so much land like that makes up Crown Point. So at
Right.
some point in time, everything will be occupied, everything will be sold. So for buyers that come to me and say, like, I want to live in East Chicago, but we can't, find that all new everything in East Chicago for whatever their pre-approval is. I'm always leaning on 203K because for the most part, you'll always be able to find something either on the MLS or off market that is in a location that they like, but maybe it needs new cabinets or new floors or something that the buyer can't really afford to pay for right out.
Hmm.
But you can roll it into a 2 or 3K loan. So nowadays I find myself talking about 2 or 3K almost immediately as soon as I see a pre-approval, because when buyers come to me, I have a conversation with them like, what are you looking for? What is, the mortgage amount that you're looking for? What kind of home do you see yourself in? Like, exactly what are you looking for? So if I get a
Hmm.
buyer that says like, oh, I want a 3-bed, 2-bath, 2-story, 3-story home in Hammond, but then I'm looking at a pre-approval for like, 240, and I'm just like, yeah, this is probably going to be, a 203K person. Like, we can find something in Hammond, in Hessville or wherever the case may be, a 3-bed, 2-bath for like, 180 or something, but you need new cabinets some. So let's just explore 2 or 3K.
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to be the realtor that says, okay, this is what you're looking for. it's not on the market. You're not going to find anything. Let's just explore what the other options are. And I think that that's,
Right.
one of the things that kind of set me apart, because a lot of realtors, like, will say like, oh, well, there's nothing on the market for that price. Well, let's talk about 203K, or let's talk about, are you eligible for new construction and what
Right.
those resources look like. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think that a really underrated program in our area is that East Chicago down payment assistance that they've got. So I want to bring that up because, for people that don't know, it's most like down payment assistance programs you have to qualify for to some capacity, right?
Mhm.
So think of it like, minimum credit score is 640 usually. You've got to, keep your debt ratios under a certain level. Usually it's
Mhm.
45%. And then, for a lot of those down payment assistance programs too, this has changed over the last couple of years. Almost every single one of them is repayable to a certain degree.
Yep.
So Indiana housing used to be a blanketed 6%. You didn't have to repay it as long as you stayed in that home or that mortgage for like 9 years.
I think it was. Yep.
They switched it about 2 years ago. Now it's repayable and
For
you have to pay it back like
no matter what.
no matter what. So when
Yeah.
you sell, move out, or pay off that mortgage, you're paying off that second lien.
Yeah. And I actually just learned that not too long ago, because of course, being a buyer's agent, I got to make sure that I keep up with,
Yeah.
what's going on. And then when she said, when I learned that, I'm just like, oh, okay. Well, and I think, speaking about down payment assistance, like, for the most part, I think down payment assistance is great,
Yeah.
because of, a lot of people don't have enough money or are liquid enough to pay for down payment, closing costs, and all that good stuff. So the idea of down payment assistance is great. But what I think that, while I actively promote down payment assistance, I think that, an important conversation behind down payment assistance is exactly what we just talked about. Now, I think that, a lot of people hear down payment assistance and they think, free money. And for the most part, at our big age, we know that there's no such thing as free money.
Right. Well, 100%. Right. There's no such thing as free money. And with all these other programs that we're talking about, they have inflated closing fees too.
Mhm.
Right. So, like with Indiana Housing, like I said, they actually dropped it now. It's no longer 6%. It's actually 5% now.
Mhm.
Again, it's repayable at the end of the term. And those closing fees are inflated by about 25%.
Mhm.
So you're not really and that's the same with just about every down payment assistance program. The other down payment assistance programs you can qualify for typically are going to come at the cost of higher interest rates, or they're going to be monthly repayable as well, right?
Exactly.
So with those, and again, all those closing fees are also 25% higher at least. Like there's one program out there that I've got that it's forgiven, the DPA is forgiven at the closing table, but you're also paying a 2.75% broker fee and you're only getting 3.5% credited to you. And that rate's, 7.75%.
Right.
So you have to get a lot of seller credits to offset that. And it
Mhm.
still barely makes sense unless you get the seller credits.
And then at that point, if you get a lot of seller credits, you might as well ride the coattail of the seller credits versus the DPA.
Exactly. Yeah. You might as
but
well bring your 3.5% down and everything. And then
but
with that, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, that's okay. But I think that, like what you were saying, like East Chicago is a down payment assistance that I've used quite a
Mhm.
few times already. And I think that, like I said, as far as you have those down payment assistance programs that we talked about, then you have the down payment assistance programs that are available at a local level,
Mhm.
depending on where you're, purchasing at. And I like East Chicago down payment assistance because it's not any of that extra. It's
Yeah.
pretty much bring us a contract and here's your money
Yep.
type of situation. And yes, with East Chicago, I think you have to stay in a home like 5 years, and
Mhm.
then for every year that you stay in it, it's prorated. That
Yep.
okay, so you stayed in 1 year, is 5,000 less that you have to pay another year, another 5,000. So, and I think that as a typical first time home buyer, that's doable because statistics show that usually on average when someone purchases a home, they usually stay in it for about 7 to 10 years, and all they're asking you to do is stay in it for 5, and so you don't have to pay it back. So I'm completely advocate for East Chicago down payment assistance. Hammond also has a down payment assistance program. Theirs is a little tricky though, and I've actually sat with Darrell White, who is a part of, who's in charge of that. And they were talking about changing some of the eligibility for it, because Hammond has it, but like the maximum purchase price is 228.
Right. Well,
So
and I think that am I correct in assuming I thought that the grant they were giving was like
no, it
$2,000. No?
changed. And
Okay,
see,
okay.
see, I'm all see. This is what I mean by as a
Yeah,
buyer's agent, I'm always in their face trying to figure it out. So it changed, and for whatever reason, is not really like in your face online. You got to kind of dig for that information or know somebody in there, and it
sure.
changed, and it's up to $10,000 now. But the purchase price has to be no more than 228, and then they also have like an income limit, which the income limit is, my opinion, like a little too low. So like I've sold a lot in Hammond, of course, and I think with the Hammond down payment assistance program, I was able to get it in maybe twice with some
Sure.
buyers, and they're the same as like East Chicago. Like there's no gimmicks or anything. Just live in the house for 5 years and then you
Right.
don't have to pay it back.
What's the do you know what the income limit is on that?
It's of course like a family of one, two, three, four, and if I'm not
Sure.
mistaken, like a family of one is like $54,000
Got
a
it.
year,
Do
and
they go off
then
of tax returns or do they go off of the 1003, do you know?
tax
Okay,
returns.
I gotcha.
Yep.
Yeah, because that's like that is a trick too with a lot of different programs. Like sometimes they only ask for the actual application. So like if somebody's working a lot of overtime, like we could just take that off, and as long
Mhm.
as they qualify with just their base,
Mhm.
like we do that with like home ready loans and stuff. Because again,
Mhm.
they just go off the 1003. They don't go off the tax returns for that. But for a lot of down payment assistance programs, they're going to use the tax returns.
Yep.
Whereas home ready is just a way to get better pricing,
Mhm.
for your conventional loans. But I really do like that East Chicago program because you've got, like I said, it's $10,000 flat, no strings attached, and there's really no additional qualifiers as well.
Yep.
The only thing they ask you to do is send in the home inspection so they can review it and just make sure that there's nothing there that's a safety hazard for the person that's going to occupy the property. Um, and so, like I've had people go through that were a manual underwrite and they had they had terrible credit, like, almost no money saved. They had like 1 month of reserves. We have an approved eligible or we have a manual underwrite we can do with the 1 month reserves. We've got a decent enough credit score to get it done. And they've got some compensating factors and whatnot. And we just need the cash for the down payment. And East Chicago is giving that to us,
Yep.
and we added a little seller credits in there to help with closing costs and
I
everything
think East
else.
Chicago also has like an income eligibility, but I think theirs is higher, way higher than Hammond, because I've closed, like I said, quite a few deals in East Chicago, and I've used that program. And I know for a fact that some of my buyers made like 80,000 a year, and they still got the assistance from East Chicago. So I think they have an income, but it's just not as tight as
Yeah, I
Hammond's.
was gonna say if they have one, I don't know about it because I've never ran into that. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe I don't know.
Because
Like
I
it,
know my last buyer, she was saying like, oh, they were asking about, how much I make and da da da. She was like, oh, I think I probably won't qualify for it. And I was just like, well, just give them whatever they're looking for, and then we'll figure it out from there. And she did, and they was like, oh, they said I can get it. Okay.
there you go. Nice. Yeah, a lot of the
Okay.
clients that I've worked with, they've been like right at or under the area median income. So like most down payment assistance programs are going to go off of the AMI, to see
Yeah,
if
that's
you're
what
going to qualify for that or not. So cool. Yeah. So we went over like down payment assistance programs, went over 203K loans. Like if you were purchasing your first home today, what would you be doing to set yourself up for the most possible success?
Um, First thing first is paying down debt. I think that while that, everyone can purchase with, credit card, the usage of credit cards, I think that a lot of people don't understand like debt to income
Hmm.
plays a huge part in whether you're pre-approved for 200 or whether you're pre-approved for 350 or something like that. So if I were looking to purchase, my one of the things that I would do, of course, is either, pay down some debt or pretty much minimize, not getting new credit cards, not buying a new car, kind of just controlling my income. And then, um, I mean, me personally, like I said, I know that property tax is probably like the biggest factor in my monthly mortgage outside. Like in my mind, I see like interest rates first,
Hmm.
property taxes second, and then
Hmm.
principal and insurance after that. So I would just kind of look at the market and try to get an idea of what does property taxes look like in the area that I'm trying to go to. So if thinking about going to Calumet City over in Illinois, and they have $7,000-8,000 property taxes, and then I'll go right over state line, and I'm going to Hammond, and I'm seeing $2,000 property taxes.
Mhm.
Like I said, that's I'm just spitting numbers out, but could be a difference of like $400 a month
Yeah.
and a mortgage.
Yeah.
So I think that studying the neighborhood, or not studying, but kind of getting a good idea financial wise of the neighborhood that you're interested in is a good thing. And also, depending on, like I said, when I talk to my buyers, and I really have a long conversation with my buyers about what their goals are financially, like for the long run. And
Mhm.
if you're married, how many kids do you have? Do you think you're going to have more kids? Do you party a lot? Is your house, and so with that being said, that kind of determines, study in a neighborhood, like how we were saying for Gary. Like if you want a low, mortgage, but then you want to be somewhere where eventually, they have the convention center and they have everything, like it fits what your family goal is, then I say go for it. But if you
Yeah.
want to, I don't know, if you're a single person and you hate noise, maybe not East Chicago, close by all the boats and Hammond, by
Right.
all the, So
Yeah.
I think that that's just what I would do if I was purchasing, and to kind of try to set myself up for,
Yeah.
the next step.
Definitely. So yeah, identifying what you want in the home, and then also making sure that you're right financially as well too.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was like a story about when I bought my first house. I think I had like maybe $8,000 to $10,000 saved, and I was 1 to 2 years in the mortgage business. I'm like, okay, like I'm making like my money, my paychecks are consistent now. I'm
Hmm.
like, it's time for me to move out, get my own place. So I did that, and I think I only put down like $4,500 because I bought a condo, used the Home Ready program. So I put down 3%. So I always paid my closing costs. And since I worked, at the mortgage company, I was able to get like waive like lender fees and things like that. Right.
Hmm.
And so, that $4,500 investment turned into, when I sold that property, over $30,000. And that was over the span of 2 years, because I bought like literally I got under contract the day before COVID happened. So rates had fallen far enough that I was able to get a lower interest rate. And then, I kind of rode that for that 2 year frenzy, and wherever, everything around me kind of went up in
Hmm.
value. Right. So that, not saying that buying a house today and cashing it out 2 years from now with, getting 30 grand, that's not probably realistic right now.
Hmm.
But it is a really good, way to explain, how purchasing real estate can get you wealth in
Yeah.
the long term.
And
Right.
that's so funny. Before I purchased, so fun fact. So I was licensed in Indiana October of 2020, and I purchased my first home in December 2020. Like
Yeah.
I was like 2 months in of
Yeah.
being licensed in Indiana. So, and I, like, knowing what I know now, like I it's a little cringy, because like when I purchased my house, I came to the table with like $15,000, like, to purchase my home.
Yeah.
I didn't know about like the down payment assistance or whatever the case may be. But the silver lining is that I didn't use down payment assistance, so that, if I sell or whenever I sell, I don't have to worry about like repaying anything
Right.
back. And then where I live at, homes are selling well over 100,000 more than what I purchased my home for back in 2020. So, that's a good thing. And then I was also talking to my husband the other day, and it's so funny that we were looking to purchase a home in Crown Point, and it came up in my memories on Facebook because I remember I posted about it, and the home was for sale for 199.99. And I was just like, oh, I wonder, what's going on with the home, 5 years now. And I looked at it in Crown Point, it sold for $400,000 some
Jeez.
months ago, and I was like, oh my God, it sold for 199.99 in 2020. And in
Jeez.
2025, it sold for 400,000. I said,
Yeah.
real estate is crazy. But and that's one of the things that, online, of course, I know home ownership isn't for everyone. So I would never force home ownership on everyone. But,
Right.
I just feel like real estate in itself, like it's an investment worth having, whether you're on the side of, primary or investing. Like there's something in it for everyone. You just gotta kind of get with the right people and have the right resources to make it work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, 100%, right? Like I think that you need to have something that that you're investing in. So whether it's you should diversify too, but whether it's your retirement account, you're investing in some real estate by at least owning a home, or you have rental properties or whatever it is. Like pick what you want to do, but you should be investing in a multitude of things, right? And so I saw this article the other day that the median home price across the U.S. is expected to reach $615,000 by 2030.
Oh, wow.
So, obviously in our area, it's the median across the entire US. So
Mhm.
places like California, Utah, Wyoming,
Probably be way
and
higher than that.
Montana, exactly. They're going to be
Way higher.
dragging the median up, right? But, with our even in our market too, there's still a lot of room to run because you've got, homes that are, in Illinois that are, more expensive than in Indiana with higher taxes and things of
Mhm.
that nature too. So, like, what's your take on, where you think the real estate market's going to go? Is it going to continue going up? Is it going to go up to that extent, do you think? And if so, like, what can people do about it today to make sure that they're setting themselves up for success?
Um, I think I mean, honestly, I think there's things that we can do that we can control. And I think that of course there's things that we can't do, like we can't control, like as far as like inflation, like there was nothing
Hmm.
we could do about, the price of wood and all this other material that you need to build a home, which affects the cost of homes. But
Right.
um, I think what people can do pretty much to set themselves up honestly is if you are financially, have money, or whether you need down payment assistance, if you can buy now, buy.
Hmm.
Because as we just talked about, I mean, the equity might not have would not accelerate as much as we've seen since we've purchased, but if it's going to trend. So things like 203k, like buy the house in the
Hmm.
location, like buy it, use 203k, do whatever you need to do, just get in the real estate now, because a lot of statistics show that wages don't really keep up. We don't know where that's
Hmm.
going. So hypothetically speaking, if it don't keep up, at least you bought a house in the location that you wanted for
Right.
200,000, and that you're able to manage it because you purchased it with the salary that you have now,
Yeah.
versus salary being stagnant but houses prices keep going, and then now you're priced out whether you're doing 203k traditional lending or something like that. So I would tell people that if you're interested in real estate, there are a lot of resources out there that can get you into a home, not primarily focused on down payment assistance, but like I said, 203k. There are investment ways that you could get in. I myself had a burr moment. I think that's what it's called. Like I
Hmm.
purchased something and then I rehabbed it and I held it. And then I ended up coming into it for a lot less than what it's on the market for. So,
Right. Right.
there are ways, and to get people into real estate. And I highly advise that people get with and connect with the right people, me and Jonathan, to to get them in position to win, because there's still opportunity out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, to that point as well, like if you look at any high cost market, and this is just my opinion on it, I could be wrong, but like let's take, Malibu, California, for example, right? I would argue that, and I don't know that I don't have the stats on this, but I would make the argument that I bet you 80% of the people live in Malibu for decades.
Oh,
And
for
they
sure.
bought like when they could buy that house for $300,000, right? And then now you have 20%, which is the new money people coming in that are paying the exorbitant prices to get a
Mm-hmm.
house there, right?
Yep.
And so I think that that's going to be like if you're on either side of the equation, like you want to be part of the 80% that's held that house for a long period of time, because you're going to see all the value you're getting from that, from the appreciation, the new people coming in and buying that property, right? And so, to your point, like if you can afford it and if it makes sense for you personally, buy a house in the location that you want. You can fix it up. You can do a 2 or 3K. You can do whatever. Um, but I think that like over the course of time, with the exception of 2008, real estate prices don't really dip. Like they go up gradually, and yeah, there's going to be some markets where like we're in now where you can negotiate for seller credits.
Mm-hmm.
So if you paid full asking price for that home last year and you go to sell it right now, you're probably going to lose money.
Mhm.
But most people, they're not buying a house to sell it within a year.
Exactly.
If you're gonna keep your home for 5 years or more often than not, you're gonna be coming out ahead, and you're probably gonna be coming out ahead pretty handsomely too.
Mhm.
And so that's just my 2 cents is if you can afford it and it makes sense for you and you want the house, buy it, sit on it for a period of time, set 5 to 10 years, and then cash out, use that money for your down payment on the next place, or you can use it to pay off debt, or you can use it to invest in other properties or other financial outlets as well. So
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
awesome. Any closing thoughts? Any words of wisdom for people?
Yes. Like I said, real estate is a great investment, and regardless of whatever end of the spectrum you're on, if you're primary living, investing, or flipping and hold, or whatever the case may be, I just think that um if you're interested in purchasing, purchase now. Like how I pretty much just said, like I can't stress that enough. um not going down a rabbit hole, but I know that a lot of people are like anti real estate, like, oh, if you purchase and you got to pay for this and you got to pay for that. And then, once your traditional 30-year mortgage is over, what you've really paid for. But I think of real estate as, at the end of 30 years, the only thing that you have to pay for your real estate is taxes and, insurance.
Mhm.
While rent is just going to always increase. So at the end of your
Right.
30 years, at least you only have to pay for taxes and insurance, which I'm 100% sure that that's going to be less than whatever the market rent is,
Exactly.
30 years from now. So that, like, all that noise in the background, like I really think that people should just, call me and let's just
Yeah.
figure out
Yeah.
if real estate is right for you, and then which lane of real estate is right for you, and let's just do this.
Perfect. Where can the people find you?
They can find me on Facebook, Instagram. I'm very active on TikTok. All my handles are realtor.Shonda Frazier.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, Shonda, I appreciate you coming out today and sharing some words of wisdom. Thank you guys for watching. This has been Local Legends, and we'll see you in the next episode.